UFOs will never become the top news story unless, well, it's the same old story time after time. Nothing really has changed. UFO sighting news have never been, and most likely will never be, treated as the top headline story in most national and local nightly TV news, despite all the recent hype about the government supposedly getting close to some form of a UFO disclosure. News stories about UFO sightings are still not treated as the top story. Most of the time, news stories about UFO sightings come at the very end of the half-hour nightly national or local TV news. Never have they been treated as the top news story. Now, why is it so? Simply because the mainstream news media still seem to consider and categorize the subject of UFOs as part of the fringe news item. The news stations still seem to do its best to avoid any ridicule, and so they have no choice but to treat such news with a light-hearted attitude. Usually, the news anchor makes a cynical, smart alecky and most of the time comical remarks about the sighting or about the subject matter in general. And then usually all of the anchors end up together with a laughter. It is a convenient way to end the nightly news on a light note, a break from serious and increasingly depressing subject matters such as economy, politics, wars, terrorism, crime, environmental destruction ad infinitum. The subject of UFOs occupies the very end of a long list of all available topics, and usually only as a filler if they can't find any other items to bring the half-hour news program to a close on a rather happy or light-hearted tone. The U.S. government has never officially and publicly stated that UFOs are real. Here, we're not talking about some personal opinions or comments made by some officials within the government or the military. The only acknowledgement so far has been that the Pentagon will look into unidentified aerial phenomena. We all hope that someday in the future, UFO news will become the top story in the nightly news program. But will that day ever come? It will never come unless the government officially and publicly announces that some UFOs are alien spacecraft and that we have not only been visited, but that we have been contacted by aliens. If that happens, it will definitely be the biggest news ever in the history of mankind. Will that happen? I remain somewhat skeptical. This is Norio Hayakawa in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, USA.